The sharp click of Karen Whitmore's designer heels echoed through the marble foyer like gunshots, each step announcing her arrival with the subtlety of a federal raid. But here's the thing about entitled HOA presidents who drive $90,000 Mercedes and treat homeowner associations like personal kingdoms. They never expect to meet someone who owns the water rights to their entire lakefront paradise. By the time I was done documenting her systematic harassment campaign, this suburban dictator had lost her job, faced federal charges, and learned the hard way that some celebrities don't back down from platinum blonde bullies with clipboards. Seriously, what would you do if some HOA Karen marched into your new home and demanded you hand over your private lake because it didn't fit her aesthetic vision? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I want to see if this level of HOA insanity exists in your neighborhood too. Let me back up and explain how this whole mess started. My name is Marcus Chen, and I've been Cardi B's personal assistant for 3 years. When you work for someone whose net worth hits 9 figures, and whose idea of keeping it real involves buying a $12 million lakefront mansion just because she liked the view during a music video shoot, you learn to expect the unexpected. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for dealing with Karen Whitmore and the Platinum Heights HOA. Cardi had fallen in love with this particular property during a photo shoot for her latest album. The house sits on 15 acres of prime real estate overlooking Lake Serenity, a pristine 200-acre private lake surrounded by luxury developments. The previous owner, tech billionaire David Kellerman, had owned the property for 12 years and apparently never had issues with the HOA. The sale went through smoothly, $11.8 million cash, no financing complications, all inspections passed with flying colors. Here's where geography becomes crucial to understanding this story. Cardi's property occupies the northeastern shore of Lake Serenity, with 800 feet of prime waterfront and a private dock system that extends 150 feet into the lake. The Platinum Heights development surrounds the other 75% of the lake, with 47 luxury homes whose property values depend entirely on lake access and views. What none of us realized during the purchase process was that Kellerman had been locked in a quiet legal war with the HOA for years. The Homeowners Association, led by Karen Whitmore, had been systematically trying to claim control over the entire lake through something called Community Water Management Authority, basically a fancy legal term for stealing someone's private waterfront. The trouble started exactly 48 hours after we moved Cardi's belongings into the new house. I was coordinating with the interior design team when Karen's black Mercedes pulled up to our front gate. She emerged wearing what I can only describe as corporate battle armor. A navy Chanel suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, designer sunglasses, and a leather portfolio that looked thick enough to choke a horse. Karen Whitmore, age 35, was everything you'd expect from an HOA president who treated neighborhood governance like a personal fiefdom. Platinum blonde hair styled in what hairdressers call the privilege, a spray tan that screamed "I have a standing appointment," and the kind of entitled posture that comes from never being told no by anyone who matters. She'd married into Platinum Heights money. Her husband Richard owned 3 construction companies and 2 country club memberships. No kids, which meant Karen channeled all her maternal instincts into micromanaging 47 families who just wanted to live in peace. Her reputation in the community was legendary for all the wrong reasons: architectural modification rejections, landscaping violation notices, and an enforcement style that made mall security guards look reasonable. "I need to speak with Miss Belcalis immediately," she announced, using Cardi's real name with the kind of pronunciation that turned it into an accusation. "There are community standards that must be discussed before any celebrity lifestyle disruptions affect property values." I explained that Cardi was in the studio and wouldn't be available for meetings until the following week. Karen's response revealed everything I needed to know about her negotiation style and general personality. "This isn't a request, sweetie," she said, sliding her sunglasses down to make direct eye contact. "This is community business. She bought property in Platinum Heights, which means she follows Platinum Heights rules. And rule number 1 is nobody, and I mean nobody, gets to turn our lake into some kind of hip-hop party venue." She handed me a thick manila envelope that felt heavy with official documents and bad intentions. "These are the updated community covenants specifically addressing celebrity residences and commercial activities. Miss Belcalis has 72 hours to review and sign, confirming her compliance with noise ordinances, guest limitations, and shared resource management protocols." I opened the envelope and immediately understood why Kellerman had spent years fighting these people. The documents inside weren't just HOA guidelines, they were a comprehensive assault on property rights disguised as community standards. noise restrictions that would make monastery living seem loud, guest limitations that would prevent family gatherings of more than 8 people, and buried on page 47, the real purpose of Karen's visit: mandatory lake access management agreements. Here's where the legal situation gets interesting. The document required all lakefront property owners to surrender individual dock rights to the HOA for community-managed recreational scheduling. Translation: they wanted Cardi to give up her private dock so Karen could control who used it and when. But the most audacious clause was Section 12C. Waterfront property owners shall coordinate all large gatherings, commercial activities, and entertainment events with the Platinum Heights Community Activities Board, chaired by Karen Whitmore, to ensure appropriate community integration and property value protection. They wanted veto power over Cardi's parties, her music video shoots, her family barbecues, basically anything that might remind the neighbors that a successful black woman lived in their exclusive white enclave. I told Karen I'd review the documents with our legal team and provide a response within the specified time frame. Her reaction told me everything about how she expected this conversation to go. "Legal team," she laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "Honey, this isn't negotiable. Every property owner in Platinum Heights signs these covenants. David Kellerman fought us for years, and look how that worked out. He sold and left. Your boss can either fit in or find somewhere else to play rapper." The casual racism wasn't even subtle, but Karen had made a crucial mistake that would come back to haunt her in spectacular fashion. She'd assumed that Cardi was just another celebrity who would roll over when faced with legal paperwork and community pressure. What Karen didn't know was that Cardi B grew up in the Bronx, where backing down from bullies isn't an option. She'd built a $80 million empire by being smarter, tougher, and more determined than everyone who underestimated her. And she'd hired me specifically because I have a law degree from Columbia and 3 years of experience managing celebrity legal battles. That evening, I called our primary attorney, Sandra Morrison, who specializes in entertainment law and property rights. Sandra's reaction to the HOA documents was immediate and decisive. "Marcus," she said after reviewing the files I'd scanned and emailed, "these people are trying to commit legal theft. They're using community covenants to claim private property rights they never owned. This is exactly the kind of case that makes federal judges very angry." She explained that lakefront property rights are complex, but the law is generally clear. If you own the land, you own the water access. HOAs can regulate noise and community standards, but they can't claim ownership of private docks or water rights without explicit legal transfer. "Here's what I need you to do," Sandra continued. "Get me all the original property records, lake boundaries, and any historical documentation about water rights. If what I suspect is true, your boss doesn't just own lakefront property, she might own the lake itself." That night, I started researching Lake Serenity's legal history, and what I discovered would change everything. The lake wasn't a natural formation. It was created in 1987 when David Kellerman's father, construction magnate Robert Kellerman, dammed a natural stream as part of his luxury development project. Here's the crucial detail. Robert Kellerman retained all water rights when he sold individual lots to create the Platinum Heights development. Those water rights passed to his son David, and when David sold to Cardi, they transferred to her. Karen Whitmore wasn't just demanding access to Cardi's dock. She was demanding control of Cardi's lake, a lake that existed only because the Kellerman family had created it, maintained it, and legally owned it for 30. But the real shock came when I discovered the dock control system. Hidden in the property's utility building was a master control panel that operated all 47 community docks throughout Platinum Heights. Every boat slip, every waterfront platform, every lakeside amenity in the entire development could be controlled from Cardi's property. The previous owner had never told the HOA about this system. For 12 years, David Kellerman had possessed the ability to shut down every dock in Platinum Heights with the flip of a switch, and now that power belonged to Cardi B. As I stood in that utility room, looking at switches labeled with each property address in Platinum Heights, I realized that Karen Whitmore had picked a fight with exactly the wrong person. She thought she was dealing with another celebrity who could be bullied into compliance. What she was actually facing was a woman who now owned the lake, controlled the docks, and had just been insulted by someone who clearly didn't understand the difference between community standards and armed robbery. The war was about to begin, and Karen had no idea she'd already lost. Karen's desperation became a living, breathing thing that you could smell from 3 blocks away, like expensive perfume mixed with panic sweat, and the bitter taste of someone realizing their intimidation tactics had just backfired spectacularly. While I was discovering that Cardi now controlled every dock in Platinum Heights, Karen was busy organizing what she called an emergency community action plan. Translation: she was about to escalate this from annoying HOA overreach to full-scale suburban warfare. The morning after her failed intimidation visit, Karen called an emergency HOA board meeting, not the kind where residents get advance notice and can attend, the kind where 3 board members meet at 6 a.m. in Karen's kitchen to rubber stamp whatever crusade she dreamed up overnight. The meeting minutes, which I later obtained through a public records request, read like a declaration of war disguised as community concern. Immediate action required regarding celebrity disruption of community standards. Karen had written in her neat, controlling handwriting, property values at risk due to inappropriate commercial activities and disregard for established covenants. Board authorized to pursue all legal remedies including municipal intervention and code enforcement. But Karen's first major mistake was underestimating how quickly word travels in luxury neighborhoods. Mrs. Patricia Goldman from 1247 Lakeview Drive called me that same morning, her voice tight with worry and barely contained gossip. "Young man," she said in that careful tone wealthy white women use when they're trying to be helpful without seeming disloyal to their social circle, "I thought you should know that Karen is making phone calls. She's telling people that your employer is planning to turn the lake into some kind of party venue and that property values could drop by 30%. Mrs. Goldman, bless her heart, had lived in Platinum Heights for 15 years and had watched Karen systematically bully 4 previous homeowners into selling and moving away. She'd remained silent before, but something about Karen going after Cardi had triggered her sense of fairness. She's also filed complaints with the city about noise violations even though there haven't been any parties yet. And she's contacted the sheriff's department about potential security concerns related to celebrity gatherings. The woman is building a paper trail to justify whatever she's planning next." That afternoon, the first wave of Karen's assault began. A building inspector showed up at our front door with a clipboard and an apologetic expression, claiming anonymous complaints about unpermitted structural modifications to the dock. Code enforcement arrived 2 hours later with reports of landscaping violations. The fire marshal made an appearance before dinner, investigating anonymous tips about outdoor fire hazards. Each official who showed up was professional, embarrassed, and clearly aware they were being used as weapons in someone else's petty war. The building inspector spent 10 minutes looking at a dock that had passed inspection just 3 months before Cardi purchased the property. "Ma'am," he told me confidentially as he filled out his report, "I've inspected this dock system 4 times in the past 2 years. It's one of the safest installations in the county. But when the HOA files complaints, we have to respond. Just document everything and make sure your lawyer knows what's happening." The code enforcement officer was even more direct. After examining landscaping that was identical to every other property in the development, she shook her head in disgust. "This is harassment disguised as enforcement. Your employer should file a complaint with the city manager's office about abuse of the code enforcement process." But Karen's most audacious move came that evening. She'd organized what she called a community safety meeting in the Platinum Heights clubhouse, complete with a presentation about managing celebrity disruption in residential communities. The flyer, which was distributed to all 47 households, included a photo of Cardi from her most provocative music video and language that barely hid its racial undertones. "Protect our family-friendly community environment," it read. "Discuss appropriate responses to lifestyle choices that may impact children's safety and property values." I attended that meeting as Cardi's representative, and it was like watching a masterclass in suburban racism disguised as community concern. Karen had prepared a PowerPoint presentation that could have been titled "How to Be Racist Without Using Racial Slurs." She presented crime statistics from other neighborhoods with celebrity residents, carefully selected to paint the worst possible picture. She discussed cultural differences in entertainment preferences and their impact on traditional family values. She even brought up concerns about inappropriate role models for children in the community. But the most revealing moment came during the question and answer session. Margaret Thornburg from 1156 Lakeside Terrace raised her hand with obvious nervousness. "Karen, I've lived next to celebrities before, and most of them are actually very quiet neighbors. Hasn't Miss Belcalis been completely respectful so far? She hasn't even moved in fully yet." Karen's response revealed everything about her true motivations and the depth of her entitlement. "Margaret, this isn't about what she's done so far. This is about what people like that do to neighborhoods like ours. We have a responsibility to protect our investments and our children from influences that don't align with our community standards. People like that." The mask had slipped completely, but Karen wasn't done. She'd prepared what she called proactive community protection measures, a list of restrictions specifically designed to make Cardi's life miserable. guest parking limitations that would prevent more than 4 visitors at any time, noise ordinances that would prohibit music above conversation level after 8 p.m., event registration requirements that would give Karen veto power over any gathering of more than 6 people, and buried at the bottom of her list, mandatory lake access coordination through the HOA for all waterfront activities. That's when I stood up and introduced myself properly. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Marcus Chen, and I represent Miss Belcalis Almanzar, professionally known as Cardi B. I'm here tonight to address some misconceptions about our client's intentions and to clarify a few legal matters regarding lake access. The room went silent except for the nervous rustling of Karen's presentation papers. She clearly hadn't expected any pushback during her character assassination session. First, I continued, Miss Almanzar purchased her property specifically because she values privacy and peaceful surroundings. She has no intention of disrupting anyone's quality of life. Second, all activities on her property will comply with city noise ordinances and zoning regulations, just like every other homeowner here. Karen tried to interrupt, but I wasn't finished. Third, and most importantly, I need to address the lake access issue that seems to be central to tonight's concerns. I pulled out a folder containing the legal documents Sandra had helped me prepare. According to county records and the original property deeds, Miss Almanzar didn't just purchase lakefront property. She purchased all water rights to Lake Serenity, which was created in 1987 by the Kellerman family as part of their private development project. The room erupted in confused murmurs. Karen's face went through several interesting color changes as she processed what I'd just said. What that means, I continued, raising my voice slightly to be heard over the growing chatter, is that every dock, every boat slip, and every waterfront access point in Platinum Heights exists at the discretion of the water rights owner, which is now Miss Almanzar. Karen finally found her voice, though it came out as more of a screech than her usual controlled tone. That's impossible. Those docks are community property. The HOA has managed lake access for 12 years. Actually, I replied, pulling out the utility building photographs I'd taken earlier, the HOA has been using dock access that was generously provided by the previous owner without a formal agreement. Mr. Kellerman allowed community use out of neighborly courtesy, not legal obligation. I showed the photographs of the master control panel to the crowd. This system, located on Miss Almanzar's property, controls every dock in the development. It's been there since the original construction, but apparently the HOA board never realized it existed. The silence that followed was the kind you hear right before thunder crashes. Then everyone started talking at once, homeowners demanding explanations from Karen, board members frantically checking their legal files, someone asking if their boat slip was still valid. Karen's voice cut through the chaos like a chainsaw through silk. This is extortion. She's trying to hold our docks hostage to get away with whatever she wants. Actually, I said calmly, this is property law. Miss Almanzar has no intention of restricting anyone's current dock usage, but any future demands for her to surrender control of her private property will be met with a full exercise of her legal rights. The threat was subtle but clear. Play nice and everyone keeps using their docks. Continue the harassment campaign, and 47 boat slips suddenly become inaccessible. Karen stormed out of the meeting, but not before delivering a parting shot that revealed just how unhinged she'd become. This isn't over. Nobody comes into Platinum Heights and threatens our way of life. I don't care how famous she thinks she is. The meeting dissolved into small groups of homeowners frantically discussing property values, dock access, and what this meant for their summer boating plans. Several residents approached me privately to apologize for Karen's behavior and express concern about the escalating situation. Mrs. Goldman pulled me aside as I was leaving. Marcus, you need to be careful. Karen doesn't handle losing very well. When the Patterson family challenged her landscaping restrictions 2 years ago, she made their lives hell until they moved. She has connections with city officials and knows how to use the system against people. That night, I called Sandra with a full report on the community meeting and Karen's increasingly erratic behavior. Her advice was both reassuring and ominous. You handled that perfectly, she said. You established legal dominance without being aggressive about it. But Marcus, Karen's not gonna back down. If anything, you've probably escalated her need to win this fight. Document everything she does from here on out, because I suspect she's about to get creative with her harassment tactics. Sandra was right. The next morning brought a new level of suburban warfare that would make federal prosecutors very interested in Karen Whitmore's definition of community standards. Karen's revenge campaign escalated to federal crime levels faster than her Mercedes could speed through a school zone. While I was congratulating myself on handling the community meeting professionally, Karen was busy transforming from suburban dictator into full-blown domestic terrorist with a law degree and a grudge. The bitter taste of morning coffee mixed with dread as I opened my email to find 17 different government agencies had received anonymous complaints about CARDI'S property in the past 48 hours. The assault was coordinated like a military operation designed by someone who'd watched too many legal dramas and not enough actual law school. EPA violations for unauthorized waterfront modifications. Fish and wildlife complaints about disturbance of natural habitat. County Health Department reports about unsanitary waterfront conditions. Even the Coast Guard received an anonymous tip about suspicious dock activity and potential drug trafficking. But Karen's masterpiece was the call to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Someone had reported that suspicious foreign nationals were conducting commercial activities at the lakefront property without proper documentation. The complaint specifically mentioned Caribbean music and non-English conversations as evidence of potential immigration violations. The racism wasn't even subtle anymore. It was like watching someone remove their mask and reveal they'd been a monster the entire time. Agent Rodriguez from ICE showed up Thursday morning with the kind of professional courtesy that comes from dealing with obviously fake complaints from obviously racist neighbors. He spent exactly 12 minutes verifying that Cardi was a naturalized U.S. citizen who paid more taxes annually than most small towns collect. "Mr. Chen," he said as he packed up his unnecessary paperwork, "whoever called this in provided false information to federal authorities. That's a felony. If you can identify the source of these complaints, we'd be very interested in pursuing charges." But Karen's most dangerous escalation was her alliance with City Councilman Bradley Morrison, a career politician who owed his last election victory to contributions from Platinum Heights residents. Morrison had built his reputation on protecting residential property values from commercial encroachment, code words for keeping successful minority business owners out of wealthy white neighborhoods. Morrison's first move was proposing an emergency ordinance requiring celebrity residents to register with the city and submit to additional zoning restrictions. The proposed law would require advance notice for any gathering over 10 people, mandatory security deposits for potential property damage, and monthly compliance inspections by city officials. The ordinance was clearly unconstitutional, obviously targeted, and blatantly discriminatory. It was also exactly the kind of legal harassment that could tie up someone's life in paperwork and court costs for years. Sandra's reaction was immediate and decisive. "Marcus, they're not just harassing your client anymore. They're attempting to create custom legislation to strip her of constitutional rights. This has escalated beyond civil harassment into federal civil rights violations." She explained that using government authority to target someone based on race, ethnicity, or celebrity status constitutes a conspiracy to violate civil rights under federal law. The penalties include prison time, not just fines. "Here's what we're going to do," Sandra continued. "I'm contacting the FBI's Civil Rights Division about potential federal prosecution. But more importantly, I'm calling in a favor from someone who specializes in making entitled suburban bullies very, very sorry they picked the wrong fight." That someone was Thomas Blackwood, a civil rights attorney who'd built his career destroying corrupt HOAs and racist local officials. Thomas had a particular talent for turning neighborhood disputes into federal cases that made national news. Meanwhile, Karen was busy playing the victim on social media with the kind of performance that would make soap opera actresses jealous. Her Facebook posts painted her as a concerned mother protecting her community from dangerous celebrity influence. "Our children deserve safe neighborhoods," she wrote in a post that gained 347 likes and 89 shares. "We can't let Hollywood values destroy the family-friendly environment we've worked so hard to build." The post included carefully selected photos of Cardi from her most controversial music videos, strategically edited to look as threatening as possible to suburban parents who apparently believed rap music could be transmitted through property ownership. But Karen's social media campaign backfired when several Platinum Heights residents began posting their own responses. Mrs. Goldman's comment became the most liked response. "Karen, I've lived here for 15 years and watched you bully 4 different families into leaving. This isn't about community standards. This is about control and racism." The thread exploded into a neighborhood civil war with residents taking sides and sharing stories about Karen's previous harassment campaigns. Property manager Jennifer Walsh described how Karen had driven out the Martinez family by filing dozens of false landscaping violations. Retired teacher Robert Kim shared details about Karen's systematic targeting of anyone who challenged her authority. Within 24 hours, Karen Whitmore was trending on local Twitter, and not in a good way for Karen. But Karen's desperation reached new heights when she discovered that several homeowners were privately reaching out to express support for Cardi. The betrayal, as she saw it, demanded immediate and decisive action. She organized what she called Operation Property Protection, a coordinated surveillance campaign designed to document any possible violations of noise ordinances, zoning laws, or community standards. She recruited 5 loyal residents to maintain 24-hour observation logs of activity at Cardi's property. The surveillance included photographing every visitor, recording license plate numbers, and measuring sound levels with professional equipment. They documented delivery trucks, landscaping crews, even the postal service. Mrs. Patterson was tasked with recording cultural music that might violate noise ordinances. Karen's surveillance team maintained detailed logs that read like intelligence reports from a war zone. 1:10:47 a.m. Subject received Amazon delivery, package size approximately 2 feet by 3 feet, possible commercial equipment. 2:15 p.m. Landscaping crew arrived with Hispanic workers, potential immigration concerns. The level of racist paranoia was breathtaking, but it was also creating a detailed record of harassment that would later prove invaluable in federal court. Meanwhile, I was coordinating with Thomas Blackwood to build our counterattack. His strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Document everything. Let Karen escalate her harassment until she committed obvious federal crimes, then destroy her so completely that she'd never threaten another family again. Marcus, Thomas explained during our strategy session, people like Karen Whitmore believe they're untouchable because they've never faced real consequences. They think community connections and expensive lawyers can protect them from the law. We're going to teach her that federal civil rights violations don't care about your zip code or your husband's construction business. Thomas had already filed preliminary complaints with the Justice Department about conspiracy to violate civil rights. He documented the coordinated harassment campaign, the false government reports, and the attempted custom legislation targeting Cardi specifically. But the most devastating evidence was Karen's own social media activity. Her post revealed a clear pattern of racial animus disguised as community concern. Federal prosecutors love cases where defendants create their own evidence by posting their motivations online. The beautiful thing about entitled racists, Thomas said with a smile that made prosecutors nervous and defense attorneys reach for antacids, is that they can't help but explain their motivations in detail. Karen's Facebook account is basically a confession written in real time. That's when Cardi finally decided to get personally involved. She'd been monitoring the situation from her recording studio in Atlanta, watching the harassment escalate while I handled the legal response. But Karen's surveillance campaign and ICE complaint had crossed a line that demanded direct action. Cardi's decision to come home and confront Karen personally would turn this suburban dispute into a social media phenomenon that reached every corner of American entertainment news. The confrontation was scheduled for Saturday afternoon, and Karen had no idea she was about to meet someone who'd grown up dealing with bullies far more dangerous than HOA presidents with control issues. As I prepared for Cardi's arrival and the inevitable showdown with Karen, I couldn't help but appreciate the irony. Karen had spent weeks trying to control someone she'd never actually met, making assumptions about people like that based on racist stereotypes and media portrayals. What she was about to discover was that Cardi B hadn't built an empire by backing down from entitled white women who thought money and neighborhood connections made them invincible. The woman who'd fought her way out of poverty in the Bronx wasn't going to be intimidated by someone whose biggest challenge was choosing between tennis and Pilates. Saturday was going to be very educational for Karen Whitmore, and probably very expensive for her lawyers. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of electric tension that makes smart people stay indoors and stupid people do things that end up on the evening news. Cardi's convoy pulled through the Platinum Heights gates at exactly 11:47 a.m. 2 black Escalades, a security detail that had worked with federal agencies, and one very determined woman who'd built a career on not backing down from anyone who underestimated her intelligence or her spine. Karen Whitmore was about to learn the difference between bullying neighbors and tangling with someone who'd fought real battles and won. I met Cardi at the front door, and her first words told me everything about her mood and her intentions. "Marcus, baby, where's this Karen bitch who thinks she runs my lake? I got some education to deliver, and class is about to start." Cardi had spent the flight from Atlanta reviewing every document, every complaint, every piece of evidence in Karen's harassment campaign. She'd seen the ICE complaint, the fake EPA reports, the social media posts calling her a threat to children. The woman who'd once said, "I don't dance now, I make money" moves, was about to demonstrate exactly what kind of moves someone makes when you threaten their family and their property. Karen, meanwhile, had organized what she called a community unity demonstration in the lakefront park directly across from Cardi's property. 37 residents stood behind handmade signs reading "Protect our community values" and "Children first," while Karen delivered an impromptu speech about standing strong against outside influences. The irony was beautiful. Karen was protesting on public land while the woman she was protesting owned the private lake they were all looking at. "You know what's crazy?" Cardi said, standing at her floor-to-ceiling windows watching Karen's little rally. "This bitch don't even know me. She's out there making speeches about who I am and what I represent, but she never even tried to have a conversation. That's disrespect on a level that requires correction." Thomas Blackwood arrived with a film crew from Channel 7 News, 3 FBI agents, and documentation that would later become Exhibit A in United States v. Whitmore. The federal investigation had moved faster than anyone expected because Karen's harassment campaign had included filing false reports with federal agencies, a felony that prosecutors love because it's easy to prove and carries mandatory prison time. "Cardi," Thomas said, arranging his legal files on the dining room table like a general preparing battle plans, "we've got enough evidence to put Karen in federal prison for 2 years minimum. The conspiracy charges alone could get her 5 to 10. But I think you'll enjoy the more immediate remedy we've prepared." He handed her a document that made her smile in a way that would have terrified anyone who understood what that smile meant. It was a federal restraining order combined with an emergency injunction that would take effect the moment Karen committed her next act of harassment. But the real surprise was the dock control system demonstration Thomas had planned. He'd coordinated with the FBI to use the master control panel as evidence of Cardi's legal authority over the lake, while simultaneously proving that Karen had been claiming ownership of property that belonged to someone else. At 12:30 p.m., Cardi walked out of her house and crossed the street to address Karen's rally directly. The silence that fell over the crowd was the kind you hear right before thunder splits the sky. "Excuse me," Cardi said, her voice carrying easily across the lakefront park. "I'm Belcalis Almanzar, and I believe you've been talking about me." Karen's response revealed everything about her character and her fundamental misunderstanding of who she was dealing with. "Miss, this is a private community meeting. You're not welcome here." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Several residents tried to signal Karen that maybe, possibly, she was making a mistake by being rude to someone who was trying to introduce herself politely. "Actually," Cardi replied, her voice still calm, but with an edge that cut through the morning air like a blade. "This is a public park on public land next to my private lake, so I'm exactly where I belong, talking to neighbors who apparently have some concerns about my presence in their community." She gestured toward the lake behind Karen's crowd. "I understand there's been some confusion about property rights and lake access. I thought I'd clear that up personally, instead of letting lawyers and HOA presidents speak for me." Karen made her fatal mistake in that moment. Instead of taking the opportunity for respectful dialogue that Cardi was offering, she doubled down on confrontation with the kind of entitled aggression that had worked on previous neighbors, but was about to backfire spectacularly. "We don't want your kind of lifestyle disrupting our community," Karen announced, her voice loud enough to be heard by the news cameras Thomas had positioned strategically around the park. "This is a family neighborhood with standards and values that need to be protected. Your kind," she'd said it, on camera, in front of witnesses, with FBI agents recording every word for federal civil rights prosecution. The crowd reaction was immediate and decisive. Mrs. Goldman audibly gasped. Robert Kim started walking away in obvious disgust. Even some of Karen's supporters began looking uncomfortable as they realized their HOA president had just committed career suicide on live television. Cardi's response was measured, intelligent, and delivered with the kind of controlled power that comes from someone who's faced much worse than suburban racism and come out victorious. "Ma'am, I'm a tax-paying American citizen who bought property in this community because I value privacy, natural beauty, and peaceful neighbors. I have no intention of disrupting anyone's quality of life, but I also have no intention of being harassed, discriminated against, or treated as unwelcome in a neighborhood where I own property." She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering the final blow. "Now, about those lake access concerns you've been discussing in your HOA meetings, I think there might be some confusion about who owns what around here." Cardi pulled out her phone and made a call that Karen couldn't hear but would understand very quickly. "Marcus, could you activate the dock demonstration we discussed? I think it's time for a community education session. Within 30 seconds, every dock in Platinum Heights began retracting simultaneously. 47 boat slips, swimming platforms, and waterfront access points slowly disappeared beneath the surface of Lake Serenity, like some kind of mechanical magic trick. The crowd stood in stunned silence as their community amenities vanished before their eyes. Boats that had been moored securely suddenly found themselves floating free. Swimming platforms that families had used for years sank beneath the lake's surface. "What the hell is happening?" someone shouted from the back of the crowd. Cardi smiled with the satisfaction of someone who just played a winning hand in a game where the other player didn't even know the rules. "What's happening?" she said, her voice carrying easily across the suddenly very quiet park, "is a demonstration of actual property ownership versus assumed community privileges." She gestured toward the lake where the docks had been. "Every one of those docks is controlled by a master system located on my property, because this lake was created by the previous owner as part of his private estate. The community has been allowed to use dock access as a courtesy, not as a right." Karen's face went through several interesting color changes as she processed what had just happened. "You can't do this. Those docks are community property." "Actually," Thomas Blackwood said, stepping forward with his federal documentation, "those docks are private infrastructure on private water rights owned by Miss Almanzar. The community has no legal claim to lake access beyond what the property owner chooses to provide." FBI agent Sarah Martinez approached Karen with the restraining order that had been triggered by her public harassment. "Ma'am, you're being served with a federal civil rights violation complaint and a temporary restraining order prohibiting further harassment of Miss Almanzar and her property." The news cameras captured every moment as Karen realized her harassment campaign had just resulted in federal charges, a restraining order, and the loss of lake access for the entire community she claimed to be protecting. But Cardi wasn't done. She'd learned something important during her years in the music industry. When you win completely, and you make sure everyone understands the lesson. "Now," she announced to the crowd, "I want to be clear about something. I didn't move to Platinum Heights to cause problems or disrupt anyone's life. I came here for peace and privacy, and I've been nothing but respectful to this community." She pointed directly at Karen. "But when someone decides to harass my family, file false reports with federal agencies, and organize racist campaigns against me because of assumptions about who I am and what I represent, that disrespect gets corrected." The crowd was completely silent, except for the mechanical whir of news cameras capturing what would become a viral video watched by millions. "The dock access will be restored this afternoon for every homeowner except those who participated in the harassment campaign. Mrs. Goldman, Mr. Kim, Mrs. Patterson, your docks will be operational within the hour because you treated me with basic human respect." She looked directly at Karen. "As for you, ma'am, your dock access is permanently revoked. When you learn to treat your neighbors with dignity regardless of their race, background, or celebrity status, we can discuss restoration of privileges on my private property." Thomas stepped forward with additional documentation. "The FBI investigation into conspiracy to violate civil rights will proceed regardless of any community reconciliation. Federal crimes require federal prosecution." Karen's final meltdown was captured in high definition for posterity. "This is extortion. She's holding our community hostage. Someone needs to stop this." Agent Martinez calmly explained that filing false federal reports, conspiracy to violate civil rights, and harassment based on racial animus are serious felonies that don't disappear because someone regrets getting caught. The crowd began dispersing as the reality of the situation sank in. Karen had destroyed their community lake access, brought federal investigators to their neighborhood, and turned their HOA president into a national symbol of suburban racism. Mrs. Goldman approached Cardi as the rally dissolved. "Miss Almanzar, on behalf of reasonable residents, I want to apologize for Karen's behavior. Most of us are genuinely excited to have you as a neighbor." Cardi's response showed exactly why she'd succeeded in every battle she'd ever fought. "Mrs. Goldman, I appreciate that. Respect goes both ways, and neighbors who show respect get respect back. It's really that simple." As Karen was escorted away by federal agents, her final words to the news cameras revealed that she still didn't understand what had happened or why. "This isn't over. You can't let celebrities buy their way out of community standards." But it was over, completely, definitively, and publicly. Within 24 hours, Karen faced federal charges. Her husband's construction company lost 3 major contracts due to the negative publicity, and she was forced to resign from the HOA board. The Platinum Heights community elected Mrs. Goldman as interim president with a mandate to restore neighborly relations and community harmony. Cardi's dock control demonstration became a social media phenomenon, with the hashtag DockDrop generating millions of views and turning Karen into a cautionary tale about the consequences of suburban racism and HOA overreach. The federal prosecution resulted in Karen pleading guilty to conspiracy to violate civil rights and filing false federal reports. She received 18 months in federal prison, $50,000 in fines, and permanent supervision that prohibited her from serving in any HOA leadership position. More importantly, the case established legal precedent for federal civil rights prosecution of racially motivated HOA harassment, protecting future victims from the kind of systematic discrimination Karen had attempted. Cardi settled into her lakefront home with the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd fought for respect and won it completely. The community harmony she'd originally sought was achieved through the simple principle that had guided her entire career: treat people with respect and demand the same in return. And on summer evenings when she sits on her dock watching the sunset over Lake Serenity, she occasionally raises her glass toward the empty lot where Karen's house used to be, a small toast to the power of owning your own water.